So Move Forward was born out of the idea of bringing the way we worked in professional sport, given our background, to working with the general population. And one of the biggest relationships that exists in the performance staff or support team in professional sport is the relationship between the physiotherapist and the S&C coach. So I thought it'd be a good topic of conversation is just to get one of the guys that we used to work with at Northampton Saints, Marc Finney, and have a bit of a conversation around that kind of relationship. So Marc now has his own thing going. He's got Finney Training, Edge Athletic Performance. That's right, isn't it? And the Fit Dad Body Plan. Yeah, nailed it. Right. Okay. So yeah, we'll start a bit of a conversation, have a bit of a walk down memory lane, and we'll go from there. So Marco, it's been a while, hasn't it, since we worked together? 6
years, mate.
Has it been 6 years?
2018 I set up, yeah.
Did you?
I left Saints, yeah.
Yeah, so since then, what have you been doing with yourself? I've already introduced it, but tell us a bit more about the things.
Yeah, so it was quite a journey really, that so starting your own business, being a little bit more entrepreneurial with my skills, and going from an environment where you're working and collaborating with some great people to all of a sudden being on my own, has been quite challenging, very interesting, but extremely exciting as well. Yeah. And yeah, very proud of where I've gone now. So like you say, I've got almost like 3 little businesses running, whereas I've got my day-to-day clients now, which is all about personal training, strength and conditioning, and the link in with rehabilitation with yourself. More of the end stage sort of stuff that I specialise in, and then my online training with Fit Dad Body Plan, which is specialising in over 40s guys that have probably, let's just say, they've lost their way a little bit and they need some structure in their life. They need showing a way to make the sort of health and fitness stuff really accessible, really simplified, so that they're going on a journey as well of majority of the time it's about fat loss, muscle building, so all the things that I can help with. Yeah. And then the youth athletic development stuff as well, which is my work with Chris Hart, Edge Athletic Performance, which is absolutely awesome. So together me and Chris collaborate really well in educating youngsters on the safe and effective elements of athletic development, from weight training, movement, speed, change of direction stuff. It's not particularly sport specific. We work with all sorts of athletes on that, boys and girls. So yeah, and it's been an incredible journey, mate, and I've had to wear lots of hats. Yeah. You know, from being admin, accountant, marketing, you know, planning, all of that sort of stuff, as well as delivering what I like to think are still good quality sessions to my clients as well, day to day.
It's hard,
yeah, busy diary.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've had a number of brews over the years, haven't we? Plenty. Just sort of talking about the other stuff, the stuff that they don't teach you when you're training for your strength and conditioning qualifications and your physio degrees. They don't teach you any of that, do they?
No. That's always a bit of an eye opener, isn't it? And we, you'll have seen it with the sports therapists and the young physios coming through, in the same way that we had interns coming into strength and conditioning. What they're learning in the classroom doesn't always reflect on what the real world is like, and the reality. And it's a little bit of a shock to the system when they all of a sudden, like, you've got to look after these 50 rugby players and warm them up, and they're like, what do you mean? And all of a sudden, so but that comes with experience, and it was all part of that fun time that we had there.
Absolutely. So let's dig into that relationship that I mentioned earlier on around, when we worked together, we were very fortunate, weren't we, in that we did have a really good department. We had a great group of physios and S&Cs, and we worked really closely. And I think for those people that don't necessarily understand how that works in professional sport, there's a big overlap, isn't there? And I think the bigger the overlap, some people may disagree with that in the industry, I don't know, but for me, the bigger the overlap, the better the outcomes for the players.
Totally. I couldn't agree more. I think particularly during our most successful time there was great synergy between your areas of expertise and ours, to create that performance environment, and also the shared expertise within the analysts as well. They have input into the sort of more of the load management of some of the players and the return to play. There was important data there from where they were prior to injury and where we wanted to get them, surpassing the demands of where they got the injury. So yeah, that overlap, as you described, we worked really closely together, and I think we built that trust in each other's areas of expertise, and that shone through every single day. And the perfect working environment was that we were literally next door. We were no longer in silos separate, which was the old setup. Where the physio department, it was all very separate. Whereas when we brought that together and created that, so you can see each other, you're connected, you know what's going on. And that workflow was so much more seamless. And we collaborated when we buddied up on the rehab of individual players. I was learning, you was learning.
Absolutely.
It was that connection where you can share your experience, and whilst you've got an appreciation that there's areas that you don't interfere with, particularly me in the early stages of the injury, the acute stages where the tissues are inflamed, you know, and there's pain, you deal with that, and then once you get them to a certain point, then we're sharing, sort of building movements in again, an early level strength, and then you're taking them on a journey together to get them back on the pitch feeling fitter, stronger, faster than they've ever done. You know?
Exactly that, and I think there was always that interest from the S&C coaches, or, you know, or the personal trainers in you know, out in the real world, I suppose, interest around what's happening in the early stages, what's the outcome, what we're trying to achieve here, rather than just, this is physio time, you know, leave it with the physios, and then eventually physios pass that over. Right now it's S&C time. That was never the case, and I think towards the end,
it's not my fault if anything goes wrong now. I've done my bit.
Exactly. That's why that overlap works so well. The bigger it is, and the same goes down the end. Your expertise is very much around, you know, strength development, power, speed, all of those kind of late stage sport specific things, which physios don't get taught. You know, we don't get taught that in physio school at all. So unless you go on and do some master's level study or extra kind of courses, you're not going to learn that stuff unless you spend time with people like yourself. You know, and I picked up a huge amount of information and knowledge that I use now. Essentially, just, you know, plagiarized and stole a lot of your drills. But you know, we still trade on that now. But the interest there was massive. But I think there's definitely obviously there's a more. We're trained in that early stages. That's the kind of you know, the main kind of
absolutely.
Thing,
and I think
same for you at the end.
There was never the doubt. There was never any doubt that the asset is the most important thing. That's the athlete, right? And the pressure to take that individual through the most time efficient way to get them back in the squad so they can be picked. You know, you really feel that. So you've got to work well together, and there needs to be trust. But also the athlete needs to know that they're well supported. So that there's not a big void. And they're not about, well, my physio is telling me this and I shouldn't be doing that, and yet you're ignoring the physio and you're doing this, then there's doubt. And as soon as doubt starts to creep in, they're underconfident. And if they're underconfident following an injury, because I think that's one of the biggest areas that's underestimated, is the psychological impact of injury. They feel vulnerable, they feel fragile. And this is an individual that's used to taking high loads, high stresses, big collisions, and if there is any doubt in that, they're gonna feel that they're not ready. So you've got to instill that level of confidence that, look, we're in your corner, we're supporting you all the way. You're getting the very, very best support. Be that what's happening before a session to get you ready for a session with Marco, or after the session, and we're working back and forth. So there's that open dialogue, and it's how do we take that and offer that to the general population? You know, how do we support those people that haven't got access to us being next door to each other? But that's interesting from you, and how we now work together when people are coming and asking Move 4 to help them on that journey, and now you share that, say, well, okay, well, we've got to a point now, but I want to bring another area in, another expert in that I feel you're going to benefit from. And it's selling those two important parts of the rehab.
And I think the big thing and a failure in the physiotherapy industry in private practice is that they don't take people far enough as a general rule, and I think that's why why we came up with the idea of Move 4 is to take that full approach, you know, taking people the entire journey back to their exactly. And I think we are not too proud to acknowledge that, you know, if someone's got to get back to a high level of, you know, whatever, running, you know, rugby, cricket, whatever it is, there is a place for that sport, that very specific knowledge and skill set that you guys have. And us sort of handing that over to you and working with you on that, I think, is a really important part, rather than sort of the physio saying, oh yeah, that's it, we've ticked every box.
I think you should go and do some more of that.
Exactly.
With them. Yeah. Maybe you should
or just do some jumps, you know, and not being specific enough, and you know, really prescribing what that means. And the difference, and we've learned the hard way sometimes in professional sport, of taking someone 97% of the way.
Yeah.
We just spoke about one particular example. And thinking you're there. But that 3% is the reason they have to come off after 10 minutes of in their return to play. And the same applies, I think. I don't think, you know, people think, working in professional sport or working with professional athletes is very different to what they're trying to achieve. It's absolutely not. There is no difference, is there, with that relationship and that overlap between someone that's trying to you know, compete at the highest level in triathlon versus someone who's trying to get back and garden twice a week.
Yeah, absolutely.
It looks very different, and the content of that is very different, but the actual the way that we work together is exactly the same.
Correct. Yeah. Being meaningful. Whilst, you know, when we were next door to each other and you got all the equipment available to you, you know, we had access to some really pretty impressive scientific instrumentation for diagnosing and assessing athletes. And in the same way of measuring performance, you know, with some of the force decks, some of the accelerometers and the tendo units that we need for measuring improvements in performance, the dynamometers that we used. You've still got that stuff. You know, and knowing that you've got access to that is so cool. It's really, really impressive, because you're using those metrics, you're sharing those metrics with me. Look, we've got an individual here who wants to do a couch to 5K, but we've done an assessment because she's struggling with lower back pain. So we've had a look at some force deck, some squats and some single leg balance, and we can clearly see that there's a deficit there. Right, what can we do to try and bring up the strength levels on that weaker side? And that's where we go, well, we're going to do this, and we're going to use this exercise, and we may do this, and then now we're sharing information that way, and that's a great tool to use.
And it's objectivity. And the biggest issue that we have with patients, and this was the same in professional sport as well, is buy-in from players. Do you know what I mean? The rugby players in particular, because that's our frame of reference, is that they spend a lot of time in the gym. They want to be lifting weights, you know, they want to be doing things that are going to make them better on the rugby field. And when they have injuries, we're telling them to work on control, or, you know, various different subtle issues. Unless we can actually objectify it and really show them and prove to them that there's an issue with that, you're really going to struggle with buy-in. So that's why, you know, these fancy bits of equipment that we have at the clinic, they are so applicable for the general population as well, because we can look at balance, we can look at dynamic stability, we can look at strength, you know, various subtle things that you might struggle to see with your eyes, you can actually find there. And then like you say, we can then hand that over to the person that they have that trust with, that personal trainer or that S&C coach, and they can continue, they have the continuity of coming to you, carrying on to come to you 2 days a week. Even though the sessions might look different, you're working towards that goal. You know, and that's what people want.
And I love that, and that's how I used to love working. Particularly with you guys, was I had a massive appreciation. I've never wanted to be that strength and conditioning coach that just had a hammer. And it was just, I insist that we do this. And I'm going to high five myself because they've got stronger on the squat, the deadlift, and the bench press, and that's me. I'm a strength coach. No, it's an appreciation and being very open-minded to, actually, in order to achieve those things, there's a lot of very complex things going on. You know, and those movement patterns are the basis of that, and that having that ability and the function of those muscles to be able to achieve those things happens in the early stages of an injury and the rehabilitation. I'll never forget, you know, some of the cues that I learned from physios, and how I applied that later in my strength and conditioning.
And vice versa.
Things like bridging. So a simple thing of a bridging is a hinging movement, right? And a hip extension. So if you look at that in its simplest form, laid on your back, tucking your tailbone, getting your abs engaged, and then extending through your hips and feeling the right muscles, coordinating the right muscles to an explosive acceleration. It's still a hinge, you're dropping your centre of mass and you're pushing from your bum, right? It's a horizontal push. But you need to be coaching that constantly. Whether you're laid on your back doing a single leg bridge, or whether you are in a split stance and you're moving a big load quickly, you're still bracing, you're still challenging those muscles just on a continuum. And that was where I felt I grew the most as well was learning those types of cues and getting an appreciation of it, not being ignorant to like, well, it doesn't apply to me because you just stick a big load on your back or you pull it off the floor and you do it quickly. And then you just hope for the best, right?
Well, that's it.
You just hope for the best. Eventually, we know what happens.
But that pays. That's massive now, though, isn't it? Because you're working with people that have issues. Most people have various issues. You know, pain in their back pain, whatever it is. Everyone's got something. I've got numerous things. But you having an appreciation.
6 hours on the bike.
Having an appreciation, though, of some of the subtle stuff and the basic stuff and the fundamental stuff, I think builds trust in those people. This guy's not, you know, you're a big, strong lad, aren't you? You know, but people walk in and make judgments about you and think, oh, this guy, he's all about, he's going to try and make me lift heavy, he's going to try and make me strong, but actually he's not going to appreciate that I actually have a bad hip. And you understand those things because of that relationship. And I think we related to, you know, perhaps times when we've not, we generally work well together, but there's been examples where a physio and an S&C haven't worked that well together and that trust hasn't been there. And they kind of, we talk about the overlap, but what happens there is they move there. So
and that athlete bounces
between the two.
It becomes too grey, too ambiguous. It's just an awful situation because then you've got the physio and the conflict then between them.
The physio's holding the player back because they don't trust the S&C.
Awful.
So and therefore the physio thinks that the S&C thinks that the physio is just
too conservative
and vice versa with the physio, and then that's where complete breakdown happens, isn't it?
It's horrendous.
But we've had some really good examples, haven't we, of working together where people have come in with an issue, you know, and we've communicated on a regular basis about it, and eventually they've come through that kind of issue, whatever that issue was, and now they're out the other side and they're even fitter than they were prior to the initial injury, and it's been a catalyst.
Absolutely, and it's fascinating when you do collaborate with a physio. You know, the information that's shared, not just about the physical stuff, but what's going on in their heads as well. Because the athlete is far more likely to open up when they're on a couch and they're able to talk about, okay, well, is it just about the injury or have you got other stuff going on? You know, the pressure to return, the pressure to prove yourself and fit, and then you've got all sorts of other baggage going on. I mean, I remember plenty of times you feel like an emotional punch bag sometimes, and it is, you know, they're human at the end of the day. They're not just that number on a rugby pitch. And I think with that, you develop those experience and skills, a little bit more skin in the game as you get older, that you can communicate about those things and you can empathise a little bit more as well. And I think that's great. And I mean, whatever I talk about in these four walls, you know, people share all sorts of things. I'm sure they do with you.
Absolutely.
So that's important information, you know, in a discreet way, but it's worth knowing, Marco, that this is going on with this person as well. And they're happy for me to share that. But that rehab journey is complex, you know, and it's never linear, is it? You know,
absolutely
I've seen you doubt, you know, how it's, you know, and the expectation that after 6 weeks you're going to be here, that's not always the case. You know, and you've got to prepare yourself for those curveballs that are inevitably going to go, and how are you going to react and respond to that to get back on that critical path and restore function and get back to high performance again. So that was crazy times sometimes, mate.
It's tricky. So essentially the message here, I think, Marco, is that, you know, all right, it's me and you talking, but we're talking representing physios, S&Cs, personal trainers, I suppose, and people who are listening to this, hopefully, some may have a relationship with a physio, some may have a relationship with a personal trainer. It doesn't matter who that is necessarily. Obviously there's skill sets and there's differences between physios and S&Cs, but what we'd encourage people to do is to join those two together, encourage communication between a personal trainer, or a coach that they work with at the gym perhaps, and a physio if they're seeing a physio. And if they have a long-term injury or an issue that they want to resolve, the best chance they have of resolving that properly and making sure it doesn't come back is by doing that, you know, and actually bringing that team together. If you don't work with a physio, find a good one. If you don't work with an S&C coach or a personal trainer, find a good one that your physio recommends or that your S&C recommends, and then that they're used to working together.
It's that referral, isn't it? I think when you have trust in somebody, you trust their opinion, you trust their recommendations, just in the same way that you might ask a friend or a colleague for a good sparky or a plumber or you know, somebody that you can trust. yeah, once you have those people in your network, then yeah, use their expertise.
Yeah.
You know, because you know that they're going to have your best interests at heart.
Yeah.
You know, and they're going to bring their A game. They're going to give their gold standard support every single time,
Yeah.
be it in the early stages of the injury or the sort of the latter stages of
Yeah.
you know, getting back to performing at a high level again.
Absolutely. Well, brilliant. Thanks for your time, Marco.
Top man.
Good to have a
Great
chat.
to see you, dude.
Walk down memory lane, and
Yeah.
look forward to
do it
seeing
again.
more of your stuff in the future. Cheers,
Cheers,
pal.
Dax.